My name is Rob Hirschfeld. Please introduce yourselves as we go around so we can get everybody introduced. This is part of a weekly. This is one of two meetings that we do every week for the Crowbar 2 design efforts. This is the design meeting. It's intended as a way for us to plan in advance and talk about topics that are upcoming in the workflow processes. The meeting on Thursday morning at 8 o'clock Central is a sprint planning session where we talk about work that's been done in the last sprint, talk about synchronization issues and process items, and then plan out work and coordination for the next sprint. This isn't intended to be the only way that we coordinate and synchronize. It's just intended to make things a little bit faster. So we set these up as a recurring weekly meeting. The last, okay, and then so that's sort of the background for the meeting. This meeting's topics, we had intended to talk. We didn't have this meeting last week. We had intended to talk about testing strategy, documentation, and code standards as a brainstorming discussion. We want to move towards actually codifying something, but first we wanted to get some things on the table. The thing to note here is that the team has been predominantly focused on the Crowbar 1 work for this sprint, and so next sprint we'll be getting more back into the flow on Crowbar 2 items and issues. All right. Anybody want to bring something up before I start launching into the design patterns and topics conversation? One other thing. Process-wise, we're using an Etherpad. Hopefully you're seeing it on the shared screen. I encourage everybody on the call to log into the Etherpad and participate there and add notes and help extend the conversation using that source. Good. All right. Any other topics that we want to bring up or discuss before we start on the background about testing and coding standards? Cool. All right. So, Adam, you had some opinions and some ideas on starting on this. Did you want to sort of set the stage for us?
Okay. Well, I guess the main point of getting a strategy document together, at least from my sort of selfish viewpoint, was just so that I could understand all the different types of tests that exist, what the coverage is like in the various areas, where the gaps are, and where there are gaps, what are the plans for filling those gaps. And also, I had to start getting involved and had to run the different types of tests, and just to get a feel for where we are and how we can move forwards and what the sort of final goal is in terms of coverage.
Okay. To me, part of this also ends up bringing up the question of acceptance of pull requests.
Yeah, definitely.
Right. So
discussion should be part of that.
Right. So I think that ends up being a part of it, which is then going to bring up coding standards or guidelines. And so I think all that ends up being a nice sort of set, which then also is going to tie into license.
And also, if we're going to have any kind of shared CI infrastructure, what that might look like as well.
Definitely.
Yeah. There's a big demand for that. I got an earful from Simon about that yesterday.
That's Judd, by the way.
This is Judd still. And for the point above, 2 points above coding standards, is there anything commonly published references that we'd like to use?
Interesting you should ask. You mean like general in the community?
In the community, yeah, or published dead tree, dead Kindle.
I'm happy. This is brainstorming. So my goal here is not that we were going to set. Actually, I'll let me specify that in the. Is not to create the standards, but to discuss. I would say that we should plan for like a Halloween acceptance. That those standards should be in place by Halloween, just because it's a symbolic date. So I'm looking at Wayne; he's nodding. Okay. He likes candy. Trick or treat. Okay. And I was going to try and find so does that sound like a good starting point for people? They comfortable with what we're talking about and why and the reach of it?
I didn't want us to have to actually write a whole standards document or a whole guidelines document, and if there's sections of something we can point to, if there's, because it's a big effort.
Yeah, I mean some of it. So there's a question of sort of what are guidelines, and what guidelines we need, because I've seen holy battles over. Spaces versus tabs and things like that. But at the same time, once resolved, it makes merges much more useful. We don't want merges that involve code movement that we don't need, right? That's part of the reason for the standards. So, no debate on that one. No debate on that one. All right.
It will be my way, so.
All classes start with a capital.
So Greg just document it the way we're going to do it.
That's right. No. I'll create a document and then we'll actually make it what we really do.
Right. And so, the first thing that Adam had brought up when he went beyond the objectives was just where to put it, right? Okay. Right. GitHub Wiki's an alternative. One of the things that I've been trying to do in the way the documentation sets are created is to be able to actually have them checked into code. So that one of my concerns about the GitHub Wiki is that it's not a reviewed source. So my thought had been in building up the dev guide book that it would be we'd have this as a section in the dev guide book where I'm hoping all the truth for developers should live.
You can update the wiki from the source repository.
Right, we can or link it or right. This sort of
web-based one that accepts comments. Seems to work super well in an editor.
Web-based what?
Web-based.
Like a blog spot. Like a blog spot.
Like a blog spot or the way OpenStack does it with their PDFs. The PDFs get printed out of
GitHub.
Whatever they're using to render the GitHub docs. It shows table of contents on the left, content on the right, and then comment areas underneath that. And I see Ann Gentle in her role going through all those comments and updating docs as necessary.
Right. And that's one of the things that we're I mean, the OpenStack has done that I like is that documentation is GitHub repository, and you can, there's a review process, and
but having no need to actually check in changes when you want to comment on documentation lowers the bar to people who are like just essays who've never used Git, something like that, or people who just read and copy edit.
Well, that's the flip, right? What I'm worried is for these things is that they're not going to be in people's radar. So an important thing to me is that that this isn't on people's radar, right? It would be a fail to me for us to make a change to the dev practices and for people not to be aware of it because they missed a meeting, or granted we'll push it out every place we can, but it'd be nice if it was part of commits. And at some point, I'm expecting us to have gated check-ins and review processes and things like that, and docs. That'll all be part of the docs. Potentially, Git postscripts would make sense. For some of the guidelines. What type of guidelines would we want to enforce like that? No tabs or? It's amazing how people are. Yes.
We could just have a link to him and call it Greg.
Reviewers' comments, right? So would it be useful? I could throw up an Etherpad pretty easily where we could work on what the coding standards would be. Is that a good place to do it as we codify it, or? We'll end up having a meeting just on this, but I would suggest that somebody take a first pass at it. It's a brief. Okay. Let me do. That's really easy. Yeah, completely.
That's good.
Yeah, I don't want to try and create a military state. I just think we want it documented so that it's clear and somebody coming into the project can understand what that is. Right, like for me personally, use of I-18N on user-facing information is important. But I mean, I don't want to necessarily drop into this right now. I'm just trying to not have that be a completely empty page. Okay. So I think we've moved a little bit further down on the coding standards. I don't want us to get rat-holed in what they are yet. We can keep discussing that on an ongoing basis. Maybe do 10 or 15 minutes as things change on a weekly basis. Now that we have a parking lot for it. So next thing after coding standards, okay, we've talked a little bit about where we should put them, so we can keep moving on that. Acceptance of pull requests criteria. Should we go there? So one of the things about this is that we expect second person reviews. Right at this point, I'm not thinking that we'll have Garrett or well, do we want to have approved reviewers? Right now, right now it's set up where the Dell team is, I think, the only acceptors for pull.
There's only a subset.
Yeah, it's a subset. So we have a limited.
Dell, I think it's what it is right now.
So there's a question. And guys, for this, I'm happy to have it be, have questions that are hanging out there. If we think the answer is obvious, then we should answer it and move on. But I don't mind if we leave questions that we can think about and then come back to. So one of the things I had done over here was I've done a straw man for guidelines for pull requests, and I can pull these in, so we can use that as a basis for discussion. So I had the pull must be Apache 2. I don't think that should be a big deal. Yeah, and so for bugs, so along those lines for bugs and minor items, right? We said that we could accept a pull without somebody being a CLA. This is the CLA, not required for bugs, minor items. Okay. This is actually a code. Ends up being a coding standard. So in this pull, thank you. Pulls must conform to coding standards. That's weird. What am I thinking? Right. So one of the things that we want to do for we don't want vendor name pieces injected. In things, although there's places where it's obviously relevant, so we want to be respectful of that and be careful. Code review we're already covering up above. Does not degrade the security model of the product. I have plenty of time. Cool.
Do we need a signed off by line in each message?
Oh, a what?
Signed by somebody.
Signed off by, like they have in the Linux kernel and Git and some other projects, like a kind of legal declaration that legal conditions that go under and give them the green license, something like that.
Oh, like an explicit in the.
Then we need a system like Garrett, because otherwise you can't track it. I don't see anything built into Git that allows you to track approvals of any kind.
Well, other than the pull requester itself, right? Because of the non-fast-forward commits, the GitHub injects an extra.
So there's an implicit, when you accept a pull request,
it injects into the stream, so-and-so pulled this, right, on this person's behalf. But yeah.
So is that enough for you to have the committers, the pull request acceptors name tied into it in GitHub?
I'm not my area of expertise, but I've just seen that other projects are using these signed off by lines and sometimes other headers in the footers, I should say, in the Git commit message that has these legal connotations. I'll paste a link into the etherpad that gives an example of how those are used.
So I could definitely see that those should be included in the commit messages if you had a review before you did the pull. That definitely. And that's actually there's a question for me in this is if we're in some cases a pull. I mean, this is almost discretionary, but in some cases, if you're doing a pull, since we don't have the type of gated check-ins that Garrett would provide, would it make sense to grab somebody and have a community review in advance of a pull request? I don't know. I'm more cataloging questions. I have mixed feelings. But.
What are we trying to achieve with the reviews? There's license compliance, ideally try to achieve unit test coverage, so we have new codes, hopefully come with some minimum unit test.
That's a different. So there is also a. I don't know if. So part of what we had talked about, is testing expectations.
What are we trying to achieve with the review?
Good question.
Code quality.
So what do you? So
What's the standard?
So Andy, what do you think?
Yes,
Well, there's coding standards, although I'd be more concerned with what I suggested, which is at least some dead unit test coverage of its new functionality.
Right. So this, to me, that is enforcement, right?
Yeah. Ideally, the silly things that have to do with CLA and license compliance and whatever not, they're achieved using some automated tool.
Yes.
Which is potentially I'm jumping ahead to the common CI, but
No. Let me try and create a place to capture that in the notes. So this is automation, right? And then license. So I'm going to do it here. So we're not trying to make review expectations in here. Okay. Sorry, these are excellent questions, Andy. I'm trying to not lose the threads, so I'm jumping around a little bit. All right, so what other expectations were you thinking, or other people were thinking?
I don't think there's.
well, we probably will hit this soon, but platform dependence code needs to be platform dependent.
Yes. So, and actually, I think there's a.
this might be a derivative, but Adam, correct me if I'm wrong, but some of your build and code in general relies on the services that exist out there in the wild. Essentially, the broader concern would be dependence on third-party teams. So if we add new dependencies, we should be able to flag them.
Boy. So that's one of the things that you're in here was that, no platform limiting. Sorry. Yeah, so one of the things that I think we want to make sure we do is if there are platform dependencies, we need to call those things out and figure out how to deal with that. But I'm debating whether I want to go down that rat hole or not. I think it's a really good one to talk about. Andy, do you have other top level things that you want to throw in expectations like this? We have two pending topics. One is platform dependencies, and then the other one is the general what does testing mean, which is on the list. Thank you.
Nothing right now.
Okay. We can, certainly jump in on and add them into the
Sample data, migration sample data to be included.
in the testing, or
Well, if you're going to accept tests, well, code is submitted. Are we talking about code that's submitted with tests? Or the review expectation is that tests should be there, and then maybe the testing expectation is the tests that are there should have sample data? Should work.
Depending on how it's
Which kind of function
so along those lines, I would say if there's a bug, it's the reproduction of the bug should be caught by a test, if possible, and then reproduced. Right, that's really useful.
Impossible.
When possible, right. So do we have a review expectation that the reviewer is going to do a build of that build before they?
Are we expecting CI? Because that would be one of the tedious things that would be nice to not have to do.
So there's two things with this. I agree with you. I think there is an expectation, although I'm an offender of this, that in the coding standards, that you would do a complete build with changes before submitting. Okay.
Immediately, as recently as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Testing your changes in a build last week.
Oh, in a fresh build?
You should say that.
Oh, so so this now we're jumping back into coding standards, but actually no. There's an expectation in the pull that code base for pull is within 12 hours. Some like that. Okay. So there's a question on the CI infrastructure, which is, do we expect the CI to build pull request ISOs, right? Do we? And I think we're going to hopefully move away from needing full ISOs to do tests, but test pending pull requests. So this is that would be a really interesting thing. If you have a pull request, should the CI system go ahead and spin a build of it?
That's been like far more complicated. We have two CI processes, one that's pulling pull requests, and the other one is only building stuff that's been accepted.
It's a question of how. To me, it's like there's a smoke level, right? If we could do a CI of a pull request, you'd have to pass the CI smoke first before it would be evaluated. So that would conceivably be a question, right? That CI passes build before review.
Well, that's problematic when you have pull requests and multiple pipelines that need to go together in concert.
Right.
Victor, that is the goal of mine, is to enable doing continuous integration testing that way. There are a few things that need to happen. First, I need to make sure the deploy is better about grouping pull requests. We need to pull request gems and have a little bit of smart to configure the public build server going on.
I really like the idea of doing that, though.
OpenStack already does this with Smokestack integration into the Jenkins, the public Jenkins instance, so that every review automatically gets a CI run using Smokestack, and then Smokestack posts I think it's like a non-binding vote. Or actually, maybe these days it is actually part of the meeting. I'm not sure whether
it is binding now.
they require a plus one.
It's binding now. You have to have a smoke test pass and then 2 reviewers and a core approver or something like that.
Yeah, so that's a really nice feature. If we can have something similar, I think that would be. And it's also nice that it's asynchronous, so that to some extent, so that the review process from the human point of view can happen even it can commence even before the Smokestack run is kind of
Right. I think to accomplish that, we're going to have people able to do a full test pass on a system before a pull request is done. So we have a level of testing, and now we're getting into testing expectations. So some of this is here. Oops, did I just lose connectivity? Nope. So one of the testing, so there's a testing expectation, which is that the system must be integrated, right? There's an expectation that testing is not per bar clamp, but as an integrated whole. Right, I want to do a quick time check just to make sure we're moving in the right direction and we're covering the right material. We have 15 minutes left to go in the time. Adam, I'll let you go first. Is this in the direction you were expecting and wanted to go?
Absolutely.
Good. Okay. Anybody else want to make adjustments before we spend the next 15 minutes talking about automation and test?
Just a general comment that we should maybe bound our discussion with things that are feasible in the next month or so we don't go too far building castles in here.
I'd like to lay out some targets. I certainly don't mind saying that they're longer term targets. Andy, I do completely agree. We want to make sure that we've got we can move towards more testing and get that done, because I think it's a good investment, especially with SUSE developers coming online. If we've agreed that we're going to have these things in, I think it makes everybody faster if we make sure that we do it. I like the pragmatism. So on that note, let's talk about what's there. And we some of this, I'll admit, I'm gonna include Tempest in this. Just Tempest. They should have called it Tempest. Damn.
They named that for the new Dylan album.
That's it. That's pretty hip.
Comes out in a few days.
All right. So we've got a certain amount of unit and RSpec going on for model tests. Right. BDD test is for UI and the REST API calls. Victor has a level of smoke of, actually there's self-test from the CLI during install. Does somebody want to talk through what our current CI system does from a test perspective?
I can talk about that a little bit. So what we have for continuous integration is we have a unit with 4 built plays. And for every second on build that we're interested in, which are referring to the thread and the development build, when we build a new ISO, we run through a function test that ensures that we can deploy a functional Crowbar cluster, either targeting our Hadoop solution or our OpenStack solution for that build, depending on which build we're targeting. And what that does is that deploys Crowbar in a virtual machine, make sure that it's deploying active nodes, make sure that it's deploying all the execute nodes, and make sure that we can deploy the solution and do a basic level of testing on the solution we care about. For OpenStack, for instance, they try to set up a full, they try to set up Nova and then run Tempest against it to make sure that all the other systems are functional.
Runs what against it? What is it? What test does it run against it? How do you?
All the components that are necessary for it runs the Tempest
Victor, I'm having trouble hearing you. You're cutting in and out, so I'm having trouble understanding what you're saying. I'm sorry.
Let me
Oh. Yes. We're in 4F if you want to walk down.
No, I'm swapping out processors.
That's a huge improvement.
Okay, yeah, that's better. So what we do is we spin up a 5-node cluster for our OpenStack stuff, and then we deploy Nova against it. And then we spin up Tempest to make sure that the Nova deploy is functional. So we will run all the function tests that pass
Each bar clamp gets its own smoke test section run as it comes up.
And that's actually embedded in the bar clamps.
Correct.
Each bar clamp has its own smoke test, and whenever we smoke test the bar clamp, an automatic smoke test all of the
It's really run during installation, right? And so our smoke includes the installation.
Right now we run this all on TDM environment. So it is doable at the same time. We're still hard to run. But I'm just showing it for Adam's benefit if they want to incorporate environments and use the same framework, it is doable.
We need to hear it because they have a lot of environment set up.
So Adam, do you want to describe what you guys are doing? What you think is relevant for us to know so that we can collaborate on it?
Yeah. Okay, well, I mean, ignoring for the moment just kind of things like OpenStack unit tests. We have a Jenkins instance and we've automated a complete deployment from scratch of a new cloud. That process exercises all the basic Crowbar functionality. It cranks through the build, and then we use the new install the new build onto the fresh VM, and then automatically configure and install Crowbar on that, and then using, I think, command line API, we then automate the creation of other nodes that should be managed by Crowbar, and then create proposals on those nodes and deploy the whole thing, and then do some basic testing of the resulting cloud. I can't remember the exact details, but I think we're probably test uploading an image, connecting to Horizon, and do some basic operations like launching an instance. So it's pretty much an end-to-end integration test of everything that doesn't go into sort of huge depth and exercise a large number of Crowbar functions. I don't think it tests things like reinstall of a node, or deallocation, or editing proposals, or that kind of thing. But just in terms of like starting from scratch and going through all the steps to get a basic code running, it does all that, and we have that happening every new build.
Okay.
That's running on a hardware environment or virtualized environment? It's virtualized.
And actually, this is automated. Yeah, there's a whole different question on manual test, but I'm not ready. I'm too chicken to jump into that in 5 minutes. Okay. It sounds to me like, one of the things for us to do is to find ways to get these tests and setups and configurations in the open. We've been talking about having an open server to do the CI on it. We're working through the legal issues from our legal department, which is not so much that they have they haven't thrown up red flags. They just have to walk around in the dark a little bit first, and that takes time. because they're just not used to they're not used to that question, so they don't have an answer in the files already. And so say if you guys have an easier path to setting up a public CI server, we can collaborate on that. It's definitely something that we see is in the works, and we want to get it done. If for no other reason than to throw off ISOs rather than rely on my building of the ISOs. I'm looking forward to that day.
Just to find out about our capabilities for doing that. I know we have some build services for supporting existing partners. Like, in fact, we probably end up, I would guess, building like Dell device drivers on our own, just as part of those kinds of agreements. But they're either involving partners there, that would still be kind of a closed process rather than a public CI server. And
Right.
I'm not aware if we do have any. We certainly have our build service for building packages and ISOs, which could easily be used for this. But for the testing piece, I'll have to ask people who are more likely to have a good answer. I suspect we'll probably have some of the similar challenges that you might face from a legal perspective.
Yeah, and when I think about it, because we have solutions that are on multiple operating systems right now, I think that we're going to end up needing to advance forward on it no matter what. I don't want to be in a position of asking you to propagate builds that are on non-SUSE OSs. You're welcome to do it, but I wouldn't make that request of you.
Yeah, well, I mean, our build in terms of just building packages, we do that anyway. Our build service supports Fedora, CentOS, Ubuntu. We do that on an hourly basis anyway, and have been doing that for a long time. So the build piece, that would not be a problem. But the testing thing, that might be a bit more questionable.
Okay. So what I want to do is I'm ready to wrap up and document future items. We can spend the next 2 minutes doing that, and then we'll revisit this topic on an ongoing basis over the next several weeks, without spending as much time on it, probably. Any closing items we want to track for next? So we need to actually coordinate automation servers, right? We can do that in the planning. Can somebody take a lead on building up some coding standards page? Or people? Bueller.
I can start. I can't. The problem is guarantee of commitment, right?
So here's
start to look at it. But I can't guarantee I'll even have time to work on it.
I know you can't. That's why I'm. So what I'm asking is that we do a strong. So why don't we do this? Why don't we just make this a topic for our future design meeting? Coding standards updates, TBD in future meeting.
Yes, we could bring a link or some other form of nominating an existing document to represent this.
And we've got some links. So what I would suggest we do is make this something of an offline topic. Feel free to bring it to the list. Make sure that we just collect it back into this Etherpad, so that we have a place where it's all being coalesced. But if you find this is going to be offline discussion on list. So feel free to take this to the list. Say as you have a thought about something and you're writing code and you think we should do it a certain way, put it through that list, and then link it back to the Etherpad. So let's just formally do that. Because this is expensive time, and I've been ecstatic with how well we've used it, but I want to be careful at the same time. On that note, let's bring this to a close, and we'll talk again on Thursday. And Vincent, I don't know if I heard you chime in on something. I hope this was effective and productive. You're the only new person I can identify for this week.
Yeah, it was cool. Thanks.
Okay. All right, everyone. Talk to you on Thursday.
Thank you, Al.
Thanks, bye.